Chapter 5 Confucianism and Taoism. Previous to the Christian era, China, judging from the available annals, presented the spectacle of a country whose social life was based almost solely on what might be called the family cult. The metaphysical tradition overshadowing the life of the people, leading to a monotheistic belief in a supreme being, was the knowledge and belief of a few. Vaguely, the people believed that the monarch alone held communication with the sublime sovereign of God. The rites had nothing of a religious character. They were purely social. Then, in 1122 BC, when the Chinese dynasty of Chang Yin was overthrown by the Zhao, there were introduced in China numerous innovations, most of them appertaining to magic and occultism. Also Brahminic and Avestic dogmas and beliefs. The whole construction of social ideology in China had undergone a slow but radical change. I'm sorry, I have to change my format here. The ground was prepared for the pantheistic teaching of the philosopher Lao Tse, whose doctrine was bitterly fought by Confucius 551 to 497, who opposed the dualist theory and strove to regenerate the former state of Chinese social life, the cult of the family and ancestors. Moreover, the whole moral code of Confucius was contained in a few words: loyalty and good feeling towards one's neighbor. Only in about 65 AD was Buddhism introduced in China, followed in turn by Mazdaism, Manichaeism, and Mohammedanism. Chapter 6 Egyptian Esoterism. More than any other country, ancient Egypt was an illustration of theocratic power. There, priesthood ruled an adumbrated royalty, depositories of the Indo-Iran tradition of Ra, Zarathustra, and Manu. The priests of Thebes and Memphis made of Egypt the fortress of antique esotericism. Their sovereign lord, god and teacher, bore the name of Hermes or Thoth, the great initiator. In him were typified the three great powers of royalty, law-giving or legislative, and high priesthood, which made the Greeks disciples of the Egyptians. Surname him Hermes Trismegistus, or thrice great. To Hermes was credited a large number of books containing the secrets of Indo-Aryan occult science. Fire was the first principle, the basis of all teaching, and the law of Amun-Ra, the sun god of Thebes. Only after the conquest of Egypt by the Hyksos in 2000 BC did the priests spread among the people the cult of Osiris and Isis and their son Horus. This popular religion served as a screen which most effectively shielded the Hermetic mysteries from intrusion and disclosure and safeguarded ancient and Aryan esotericism, which had to fear annihilation at the hands of the priesthood of the black or Ethiopian race, whose esotericism was based upon a different conception of occult and psychic knowledge. A striking example of the rivalry of the two esoteric schools is given in the Bible when Moses and Aaron, practicing the magic taught them by the Ethiopian Jethro, failed to confound the Egyptian priests before Pharaoh. Concealed behind the popular cult of Osiris and Isis was the soul of Egyptian esotericism, which no one could reach except after having been deemed worthy to penetrate the most sacred mysteries of Isis, whose statue, with its face veiled, stood before the door, the temple of occultism. The trials of initiation, which a candidate had to withstand before he beheld the light of Osiris and understood the vision of Hermes, were long and terrible. They were interspersed, however, by states of trance induced by special beverages, during which the initiate had voluptuous visions of Isis preceded by 5-pointed flamboyant star or the rose of Isis. Two great flowing currents issued from the esoteric wisdom: jealousy, safeguarded by the Egyptians, namely Mosaism and Judaism, taught by Moses, whose god was Jehovah, and Orpheism, taught by Orpheus, whose god was Zeus or Jupiter. The former adapted his beliefs to suit the mentality of undisciplined, rebellious masses of Israelites in Egypt, hence a god of fear and vengeance. The latter legislated for a people whose Hellenic genius touched sublime heights of philosophic wisdom on the one hand, and sought on the other to carry its irrepressible sense of beauty and light-heartedness in its pursuit of material pleasures. Hence the great difference between the two currents, which had derived their initial teaching from the same source. Chapter 7. Judaism, the Pharisees. Judaism has been described by Moses Mendelssohn, a learned Jew, in his way. Judaism is not a religion, but a law religionized. This definition does away effectively with the erroneous belief prevalent among non-Jews that Judaism is a religion. In spite of the loud and frequent assertions made by Jews and Christian divines alike, commenting that Jews were the first monotheists, it is well proven fact that the high initiates of the Memphis priesthood were monotheists long before the Jews ever went to Egypt. Judaism would be best described as a rite or compendium of rites, for if one lends belief to the existence of the Jewish lawgiver, Moses, one must bear in mind that the first studied among the high initiates of Egypt and later became the pupil and son-in-law of Black Jethro, the Ethiopian magician, whom one might call the father of voodooism, name given to the magic practices and rites performed by the Negroes. The closer one studies the history of the Jews, the clearer it appears that they are neither a religious entity nor a nation. The absolute failure of Zionism, which was a desperate effort on the part of the certain Jewish leaders to bind all Jews of the world into a national entity, whose territory would have been Palestine, proves the futility of such effort. Judaism is not a religion, and the Jews are not a nation, but they are a sect with Judaism as a rite. The obligations and rules of the rite for the Jewish masses are contained in the Talmud and the Shulchan Aruch, but the esoteric teachings for the higher initiates are to be found in the Kabbalah. Therein are contained the mysterious rites for evocations, the indications and keys to practices for conjuration of supernatural forces, the science of numbers, astrology, etc. The practical application of the Kabbalist knowledge is manifested in the use made of it through the ages by Jews to gain influence both in the higher spheres of the Gentile life and over the masses. Sovereigns and popes both usually had one or more Jews as astrologers and advisors, and they frequently gave Jews control over their very life by employing them as physicians. Political power was thus gained by Jews in almost every Gentile country alongside with financial power, since Jewish court bankers manipulated state funds and taxes. Through the ages also can be followed the spreading power of the sect, and no more awful example of the devastating and destructive power of the penetration of a secret, subversive society has ever been witnessed. With the nigh birth of Supreme Council as the directing head, the sect, with its members swarming among all nations, has become the sovereign power ruling in the councils of all nations and governing their political, economic, religious, and educational policies. In his book Nicholas II, Ejevs Nechvolodov, sorry about that, explains that the Chaldean science acquired by many of the Jewish priests during the captivity of Babylon gave birth to the sect of the Pharisees, whose name only appears in the Holy Scripture and in the writings of the Jewish historians, after the captivity 606 BC. The works of the celebrated scientist Monk leave no doubt on the point that the sect appeared during the period of the captivity. From then dates the Kabbalah or tradition of the Pharisees. For a long time their precepts were only transmitted orally, but later they formed the Talmud and received their final form in the book called the Sefer Zohar. Pharisees were, as it were, a class whose tendency was to form a kind of intellectual aristocracy among the Jews. At first, they formed a sort of brotherhood, a Habura, the members called Haburim, or brothers. They were a subversive element, aiming at the overthrow of the Sadducean high priesthood, whose members prided themselves on their aristocracy of blood and birth, to which the Pharisees opposed an aristocracy of learning. The war waged by the latter extends over a long period of time, and the rivalry was bitter. The Pharisees, who, although they professed as one of their chief tenets the utmost contempt, the Haaretz, or simple people, did not overlook the fact that they needed their mass support for the attainment of their own aim, and they enlisted it by opposing the Sadducean strictness of the law in many instances, namely in the observance of the Sabbath. The power of the Sadducees fell with the destruction of the temple by Titus, and henceforth the Pharisaic element held supremacy among the Jews. Quoting an acknowledged authority on Judaism, Mr. Flavien Brenier, Lieutenant General Nechvolodov, further describes the policy of the sect as follows. Before appearing proudly as the expression of Jewish aspirations, the tradition of the Pharisees had serious difficulties to surmount, the chief of which was the revival of the Orthodox faith stimulated in the Jewish people by the captivity. To the exiles bemoaning the fall of the Temple of Jerusalem and begging Jehovah to end the misfortunes of their homeland, the revelation that Jehovah was only a phantom entailed not only certain defeat, but also their own exposure to perils, the least of which would have been the loss of all authority over Israel. The Pharisees then, judging it wiser to capture the confidence of their compatriots by taking the lead of the religious movement, affected a scrupulous observance of the slightest prescriptions of the law and instituted the practice of complicated rituals, simultaneously, however, cultivating the new doctrine in their secret sanctuaries. These were regular secret societies composed during the captivity of a few hundred adepts. At the time of Flavius Josephus, which was that of their greatest prosperity, they numbered only some 6,000 members. This group of intellectual pantheists was soon to acquire a directing influence over the Jewish nation. Nothing, moreover, likely to offend national sentiment ever appeared in their doctrines. However saturated with pantheistic Chaldeism they might have been, the Pharisees reserved their ethnic pride intact. The religion of man, divinized, which they had absorbed at Babylon, they conceived solely as applying to the prophet of the Jew, the superior and predestined being. The promises of universal dominion, which the Orthodox Jew found in the law, the Pharisees did not interpret in the sense of the reign of the God of Moses over the nations, but that of the material domination to be imposed on the universe by the Jews. The awaited Messiah was no longer the redeemer of original sin, a spiritual victor who would lead the world. It was a temporal king, bloody with battle, who would make Israel master of the world and drag all peoples under the wheels of his chariot. The Pharisees did not ask this enslavement of the nations, of a mystical Jehovah, which they continued worshiping in public, only as a concession to popular opinion, for they expected its eventual consummation to be achieved by the secular patience of Israel and the use of human means. Monstrously different from the ancient law were such principles as these, but they had nothing one could see which might have rendered unpopular those who let them filter, drop by drop, among the Jews. The admirably conceived co-organization of the Pharisees did not fail soon to bear fruit. One cannot better define its action in the midst of Jewish society before Jesus Christ, and Mr. Flavian Bernier, than in comparing with it that of the Freemasons in modern society. A carefully restricted membership, tightly bound, imposing on their members the religion of the secret, the Pharisees pursued relentlessly their double aim, which was, 1, the seizure of political power by the possession of the great political offices, the influence of which was tremendous in the reconstituted Jewish nation, and the conquest of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish parliament. 2, to modify gradually the conceptions of the people in the direction of their secret doctrine. The first of these aims was achieved when Hillel, a Pharisee of Babylon who claimed Davidic descent, was elected president of the Sanhedrin. Thus ended the bitter fight between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Opposed to Hillel was Shammai, a Sadducee, supporter of the Sadducean high priest who was made chief judge of the assembly. The attitude of the two men towards each other is a matter of long record in the Talmud. Among the most noted Pharisees after Hillel are Yochanan ben Zakkai, founder of the school of Yamnai, Akiba, who with Bar Kokhba fomented the revolt against the Romans under Hadrian, rebellion ending with the order for the dispersion of Jews at 132 AD. Also Simon ben Yohai, who might be termed the great magician and father of the Kabbalah. Lastly, Judah, the prince who compiled the Babylonian Talmud. Under these chiefs, the Pharisaic power was definitely established in the Sanhedrin. Those among the Jews who clung to the Sadducean tradition and refused to acknowledge the dominion of the Pharisees remained as dissidents. Such were the Samaritans and the Karaites, who rejected the Talmud. The second of the aims and its method of attainment is exposed in the so-called Protocols of the Wise Men of Zion, so loudly denounced by the descendants of those who devised the secret doctrine in Israel, Israel here meaning the Jews as a religious community, most of whom remain quite ignorant of the intricate subversive schemes imputed to them. The attitude of Jesus Christ to this sect is definitely expressed in the New Testament. See Luke 11 and John the 8th. Esoteric Judaism, the Jewish religion as practiced in the 20th century, is based on the Old Testament and on equally ancient commentaries on it. Preserved for ages as oral traditions and known as above stated under the general name of the Talmud, all copies of this book were ordered to be burned by Philip IV, the Fair, King of France, in 1306, but the book survived the Holocaust. We know that the Jewish God is not the father of all men. Excuse me, I'll have to take a drink. I'm sorry. We know that the Jewish God is not the father of all men, and the ideal of love, justice, and mercy, like the Christian God, or even like Ahura Mazda or Brahma. On the contrary, he is the God of vengeance, down to the 4th generation, just and merciful only to his own people, but foe to all other nations, denying them human rights and commanding their enslavement, that Israel might appropriate their riches and rule over them. The following quotations will serve to illustrate this point. And when the Lord thy God shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor shew mercy unto them. For thou and art, that was Deuteronomy 6:2. For thou art an holy people unto thy Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be the special people unto himself above all people, and above all people that are upon the face of the earth. Deuteronomy 7:6. The Talmud comments upon it. You are human beings, but the nations of the world are not human beings, but beasts. Baba Messiah 114:6. On the house of the Goy, non-Jew, which is what the Jews call anybody who isn't a Jew, Goy, one looks as on the fold of cattle. Tosefta, Erubin 9 or 8, if I can read that correctly. From the Talmud, a prayer said on the eve of Passover to the present day, we beg thee, O Lord, indict thy wrath on the nations not believing in thee, and not calling on thy name. Let down thy wrath on them, and afflict them with thy wrath. Drive them away in thy wrath, and crush them into pieces. Take away, O Lord, all bone from them. In a moment indict all disbelievers. Destroy in a moment all foes of thy nation. Draw out with the root, disperse and ruin unworthy nations. Destroy them immediately, in this very moment. Page 83, Judaism. Page 83, Judaism, the Pharisees. And 12. Minhagen, page 23, and all people, and above all people that are upon the face of the earth. Deuteronomy 7:6. The Talmud comments upon it. You are human beings, but the nations of the world are not human beings, but beasts. Baba Messiah 114:6. On the house of the Goy, non-Jew, which is what the Jews call anybody who isn't a Jew, Goy, one looks as on the fold of cattle. Tosefta, Erubin 9 or 8, if I can read that correctly. From the Talmud, a prayer said on the eve of Passover to the present day, we beg thee, O Lord, indict thy wrath on the nations not believing in thee, and not calling on thy name. Let down thy wrath on them, and afflict them with thy wrath. Drive them away in thy wrath, and crush them into pieces. Take away, O Lord, all bone from them. In a moment indict all disbelievers. Destroy in a moment all foes of thy nation. Draw out with the root, disperse and ruin unworthy nations. Destroy them immediately, in this very moment. That's from Pranaitas Christianus in Talmudas Judaeum, quotations from Synagoga Judaica, page 212, Minhagen, page 23, and Krachchain, 480, Haga. When one sees inhabited houses of the Goy, one says, the Lord will destroy the house of the proud. And when one sees them destroyed, he says, the Lord God of vengeance has revealed himself. That's from the Babylonian Talmud, Bereshit 58.6. Those who do not own Torah and the prophets must be all killed. Who has power to kill them? Let him kill them openly, with the sword if not. Let him use artifices until they are done away with. Shulden, Aruch, Chosen Hamasbat, 425.50. The Jewish sages soon understood that Christ's way of commenting upon the old law introduced, instead of hatred towards foreign nations, brotherly feelings and equality of all men in the face of God, thus denying the Jews their privileged position as masters of the world. At the same time, Christ reforming the very primitive and rough moral ideas of the Old Testament, deprive the Jews of their very convenient in the battle of life, unscrupulous double morality. Thence the Jewish hatred for the Christian faith is conspicuous in the following quotation. Chapter 6. Page 83, Judaism, the Pharisees. The estates of the Goy are like wilderness. Who first settles in them has the right to them. Baba Batra, 54. The property of the Goys is like a thing without a master. Shulchan Aruch, chosen Hamisvat, 156.5. If a Jew has struck his spade into the ground of the Goy, he has become the master of the whole. Baba Batra, 55a. In order to enhance the authority of the Old Testament, equally recognized by the Christians, while simultaneously augmenting that of the Talmud and the rabbis, its commentators and authors teach the following. In the law, the Bible, are things more or less important, but the words of the learned in the scripture are always important. It is more wicked to protest the words of the rabbis than of Torah. Mishnah, Sanhedrin 11.3. Who changes the words of the rabbis ought to die. Erubin 21b. The decisions of the Talmud are words of the living God. Jehovah himself asks the opinion of earthly rabbis when there are difficult affairs in heaven. Rabbi Menachem, comments of the 5th book. Jehovah himself in heaven studies the Talmud. Standing, he has such respect for that book. T.R. Meshillah. To enhance the dignity of religion's dogmas, the following commandments are given. That the Jewish nation is the only nation selected by God, while all the remaining ones are contemptible and hateful. That all property of other nations belongs to the Jewish nation, which consequently is entitled to seize upon it without any scruples. That an Orthodox Jew is not bound to observe principles of morality towards people of other nations, and on the contrary, he even ought to act against morality, if it were profitable for himself or for the innermost interest of the Jews in general. A Jew may rob a Goy. Goy means unclean, and is the disparaging name for a non-Jew. He may cheat him over a bill which should not be perceived by him, otherwise the name of God would become dishonored. Shulchan Aruch, chosen Hamispat, 348. Should a Goy to whom a Jew owed some money die without his heirs knowing about the debt, the Jew is not bound to pay the debt. Shulchan Aruch, chosen Hamispat, 283, 1. The son of Noah, who would steal a farthing, ought to be put to death, but an Israelite is allowed to do injury to a Goy, where it is written, Thou shalt not do injury to thy neighbor, is not said, Thou shalt not do injury to a Goy. Mishnah, Sanhedrin 57. A thing lost by a Goy may not only be kept by the man who found it, but it is forbidden to give it back to him. Shulchan Aruch, chosen Hamisvat, 266, 1. Who took an oath in the presence of the Goys, the robbers, and the custom house officer is not responsible. Tosefta Tsepnot 11. In order to annul marriages, oaths, and promises, a Jew must go to the rabbi, and if he is absent, he must call 3 other Jews and say to them that he is sorry to have done it, and they say, Thou art allowed to. Shulchan Aruch 2:1, 247. In Kol Nitre, prayer on the Day of Judgment, that acquits beforehand from the non-fulfillment of all kinds of oaths and vows, is given here. All vows, oaths, promises, engagements, and swearing, which beginning this very day of reconciliation we intend to vow, promise, swear, and bind ourselves to fulfill, we are sorry for already, and they shall be annulled, acquitted, annihilated, abolished, valueless, unimportant. Our vow shall be no vows, and our oaths no oaths at all. Shulchan Aruch, edit 1, 136. We go on. If a goy wants a Jew to stand witness against a Jew at the court of law, and the Jew should give it fair evidence, he is forbidden to do it. But if a Jew wants a Jew to be a witness in a similar case against the goy, he may do it. Shulchan Aruch, chosen Hamizpat 28, article 3 and 4. Should a Jew inform the goyish authorities that another Jew has much money and the other will suffer a loss through it, he must give him remuneration. Shulchan Aruch, chosen Hamizpat 338. I'm going to stop naming where these scriptures, where these texts were found, because it's just getting a little silly. You can download this and check for yourself later. If there is no doubt that someone thrice betrayed the Jews or caused that their money passed to the goys, it means a wise counsel must be found to do away with him. Everyone must contribute to the expense of the community, kahal, in order to do away with the traitor. It is permitted to kill a Jewish denunciator everywhere. It is permitted to kill him before he has denounced, though it is necessary to warn him and say, "Do not denounce." But should he say, "I will denounce," he must be killed, and he who accomplishes it first will have the greater merit. How to interpret the word robbery? A goy is forbidden to steal, rob, or take women slaves, etc., from a goy or from a Jew, but he, a Jew, is not forbidden to do all this to a goy. If a goy killed a goy or a Jew, he is responsible, but if a Jew killed a goy, he is not responsible. The authors of the Talmud, having issued this horrible moral code that acquits all kinds of crimes in order to make easier the strife with foreigners to their nation, understood the necessity of keeping its contents a secret, and thus legislated. To communicate anything to a goy about our religious relations would be equal to the killing of all the Jews, for if the goys knew what we teach about them, they would kill us openly. This is from the book of Liber David 37. It is forbidden to disclose the secrets of the law. He who would do it would be as guilty as if he destroyed the whole world. The restrictions and commandments bearing this in view were raised to the dignity of dogmas of faith. It is not astonishing that in the face of such prohibitions, the secrets of the Talmud have been so little known to other nations, especially to the Western ones. Until the present day, even the most progressive and citizen-like Jews think the disclosure of the principles of the Talmud a proof of the most outrageous intolerance and an attack on the Jewish religion. In order to separate the Jewish nation from all the others and thus prevent it from mixing with them and losing their national peculiarities, a great many precepts of the ritual and rules of everyday life, prejudices and superstitions, the remainder of times of barbarism and obscurity have been gathered in the Talmud and consecrated as canons. The precepts observed by Eastern Jews till the present day deride even the most simple notions of culture and hygiene. For instance, they enjoin, if a Jew be called to explain any part of the rabbinic book, he only ought to give a false explanation, that he might not, by behaving differently, become an accomplice in betraying this information. Who will violate this order shall be put to death, from the Liber David 37. It is forbidden to disclose secrets of the law. We go on with the quotations. One should and must make false oath. When the goys ask if our books contain anything against them, then we are bound to state on the oath that there is nothing like that. Every goy who studies Talmud, and every Jew who helps him in it, ought to die. The ears of the goys are filthy. Their baths, houses, countries are filthy. A boy goy after 9 years and 1 day old, and a girl after 3 years and 1 day old are considered filthy. These principles afford an explanation of the action of governments. In excluding Jews from the judicial and military positions, they also explain that mysterious phenomenon known as anti-Semitism. In his Manual of Freemasonry, Richard Carlile makes the following observations. The disposition of the mistaken Jew is to monopolize the portion of the sacred scriptures as a charm or benefit prepared and presented to his people in their sectarian character. That there was no such nation as the Israelites is the truth, found in the consideration that there are not mentioned beyond the Bible, in any records whatever. Egypt knew them not, Persia knew them not, Hindostan knew them not, Scythia knew them not, Phoenicia knew them not, Greece knew them not as a nation, and in the first general notice that we have of the Jews, they are introduced to the world as a sect, or a series of sects, being Pharisees, Sadducees, and Essenes. And in the general notice, beyond that sort of mistaken allegorical history which Josephus has copied from the books of the Old Testament and which is not otherwise corroborated, and no better authority than the book of the Old Testament, there is no presentation of the Jews as the descendants of a larger nation of Israelites, as a religious or philosophical sect of distinction mixed up with and found in real human history. They are not to be traced higher than the century before the Christian era. It is satisfactory to be able to show the origin of anything, for such a knowledge is a common passion and curiosity among mankind, and I think the Reverend Robert Taylor has discovered and developed the origin of the titles of Hebrew, Israelite, and Jew. Hebrew, Israelite, and Jew are Syriac, Phoenician, and Egyptian terms used in mysterious degrees, and it would be as reasonable to argue that the Freemasons are a dispersed nation as that the Jews are, or were, a dispersed nation. The Reverend Mr. Taylor has beautifully explained this in his discourses. The scenes and characters of the mysterious drama as found in the Eleusinian orgies of Greece were Ulysses, the advent or coming in light, the birth and character of the subject of the drama, and the title of the whole play or mystery, the Hierophant, expounder of the mysteries, the high priest, the pope, the archbishop, Huperit, the minister or ordinary priest, Diakonos, the deacon or lower officer, Diadochos, the torchbearer, Photogogue, the bringer in of light, Autoptus, the candidate admitted to see the light, the sight, the visitor of the temple, the church and chapel goer, Autopsy, the sight itself, Hebrew, the initiated candidate who had passed through all degrees of the mystery, Teleois, the adept or perfected, Israelite, God-seer, purified from all guile, Jew, the God himself, or the mysterious perfection and deification of the human character, the whole type of what may be made human nature by cultivation of mind, which is the conditional promise of paradise or kingdom of heaven. This is the revelation of all the mysteries. Carlyle further states, we are prepared with historical disproofs of the existence of such people as Israelites or Jews as a nation. They were a religious or philosophical sect who had been made adepts in the higher pagan mysteries, a sect among nations, but not a nation among sects. Judaism sanctions Gnosticism, which is further elaborated in their book at the Kabbalah. Excuse me, I totally bombed out on that sentence. Judaism sanctions Gnosticism, which is further elaborated in their book of the Kabbalah. For further study of this subject, we refer to the reader to chapter 8.